Welcome back to the movies with Bucketeer, and today we're going to talk about Solo, the new Star Wars movie. Now, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to try to keep this spoiler-free. I don't think I'm going to cross into anything that you shouldn't already know, but if you haven't already watched the other Star Wars movies, spoilers, I guess. The first thing I have to say about Solo is that this movie is just not necessary. Han Solo was fully established as a character within 5 minutes of being introduced in A New Hope. Both the writing of the character and Harrison Ford's portrayal of him let you know who he was and what you were getting into with him. There's not really any need for his backstory because he comes into the Star Wars canon fully formed. He's a complete character right there. And then he has an excellent character arc throughout the movies, from the rogue that we first meet in Episode 4 to the freedom fighter of Empire Strikes Back, and finally to the leader of Return of the Jedi. He has a great arc throughout the original trilogy. And then he dies, which only happened 2.5 years ago in real time, which is a problem. You had a fully formed character who goes through an excellent arc. They bring him back after 32 years, and then kill him in that movie. And then 2.5 years later, they have a prequel. It just happened way too soon. If they hadn't had him in Episode 7, the prequel would have made sense. If they had waited another 3 or 4 years and moved out of people's collective consciousness, then the movie would have made sense. Making Solo this soon on the heels of his death doesn't make any sense. And all that being said, the movie was actually really good. As good as you possibly could have expected, and maybe a little bit more. Let's go into the next issue with Solo, and that is the problem with prequels. Prequels are always hard to do properly, especially with a character that just doesn't need one. You know the ending. Going into Solo, there's no question that Han, Chewie, and Lando will survive, and everybody else in the story you know for a fact will either have to die or be written out, and as a consequence you are basically spoiled for it. This removes a lot of the tension in the story. There's no element of will they be okay for the main characters. You know that certain members of the cast are absolutely bulletproof, and then you know that the other ones are absolutely not. This creates a potential minefield of issues when you go into creating a prequel, but Solo actually avoids all of those issues. So that's enough background. Let's get into the actual movie itself. And this is a heist movie at its heart, which is something that I like. I'm a sucker for a good heist movie. I like the crews, I like the planning, I like the execution and the inevitable improvisation. It's always a lot of fun when you see the various characters constantly trying to outsmart each other and backstab each other. We start off the movie seeing Han Solo as a young rogue growing up on Corellia. You see the reason that he has this dream of always wanting to fly. And then you actually come into a section where they subvert some of the expectations for the Star Wars lore nerds like me. If you don't know, in the old canon, Han Solo was in the Imperial Navy for a time where he learned to fly. But that's not quite how it pans out in this movie, which is fun because it shows that they know that old canon, they know that old lore, but they're also willing to play with it a little bit to give you a more interesting story. Overall, it's a very interesting portrayal of Han because what it does is it tries to set up the character that we're eventually going to see, and it tries to show you in a very organic way how that character came to be, and it does it without being quite as on the nose as you might expect. Han Solo at the start of this movie is not Han Solo from Episode 4. He's a different character who goes through his own character arc through the course of this movie that transforms him from the Han Solo, the young, very idealistic man, into the much more jaded cynic that we see in Episode 4. Aldrin does as good a job as he could with an impossible task because he's trying to portray one of the most famous characters in all of movies. And he really does come off feeling like a young Han Solo to me. He spent a lot of time trying to learn Solo's mannerisms and to interpret those as best he could. That said, it's going to be a stumbling block for some people because he is clearly not Harrison Ford. And this goes back to the problem of bringing Han Solo back after 32 years and then immediately killing him and then immediately going into a prequel movie about him. This probably could have been subverted or avoided to a great deal if they had just not brought him back for Episode 7. But that's an entire different problem that I have with the new trilogy. We meet Chewie, and he's Chewie. There's a tiny bit of story due to his history of being a slave, but he's the Chewie we all know and love, and his relationship with Han is pretty much immediate. but it's still a lot of fun. I like Chewie, so it doesn't really bother me. Donald Glover is absolutely amazing as Lando. The kind of person that you would have expected from a young Billy D. Williams, that's Donald Glover in this movie. And as much as I was nervous about this, I am now fully on board with the idea of Lando getting his own standalone movie. I really hope that happens. He absolutely kills it. Woody Harrelson plays, well, exactly who you would expect Woody Harrelson to play in a heist movie. He's a major influence on Han, because in a lot of ways, Woody Harrelson's character is what you would get from Han if all of Han's idealism got burned away and you were just left with the inner cynic. And I kind of like that mirror of what Han could have wound up to be if he hadn't run into Luke Skywalker in Episode 4. Kira, played by Emilia Clarke, was, well, we're getting a bit into spoiler territory. Not going into it, but close to it. But the big issue with her character is the prequel problem. Specifically that while she is a major influence on the young Han, we know for a fact going into this movie, she has to be completely out of the picture by Episode 4. So as good a job as she does, there's always that thing in the back of your mind that says, at the end of this movie, I know you're gone. I don't know exactly how, but you're going to be out of here. So, again, she does the best she can within the constraints of a prequel. The whole movie is just a very fun and exciting heist movies in Star Wars that utilizes Star Wars as a setting to be able to create more fantastical situations, more amazing vistas for the heist to take place in. This is something that I so want to see happen with the Star Wars movies. Star Wars can be a fantastic setting. You can do any kind of movie you want in that setting. This shows where we had a heist movie. And I really hope that with the success of this movie, we might, maybe, please, get away from the Solo and Skywalker clan and strike out into new territory using Star Wars as a setting. Ron Howard did a fantastic job with this movie. A prequel could turn in on itself, wallowing in fan service and spending more time going, look at this thing, we all love it, and it's here, isn't that awesome? And instead, he hits the high points of the backstory that we know, using them as minor touchstones to build a totally new story. Really, if you're going to make a prequel, you need to see what Ron Howard did with Solo, and use that as how you're going to do it. In conclusion, this movie is more than worth the watch. I was very happy I got to go see it on opening night in IMAX 2D because 3D is a crappy gimmick. And it was great. I know a lot of people are very leery about Star Wars after The Last Jedi, but please don't miss this one. It is absolutely worth the watch, and I'm buying it as soon as it comes out. And I'll do a full review of it when it happens, and hopefully Disney doesn't screw me again. This has been Bogatir. I'll catch you next time.